Hi everyone, welcome back to episode number 3 of my editing tutorials. Today we are taking a look at the skyline sunrise image of Toronto taken from Humber Bay Park, and we are going from this to this, and I will start by processing the image in Lightroom and then heading over to Photoshop to finish the edit. So let's begin. I'm going to start by going over to the lens correction panel and turning on remove chromatic aberration and also enable profile corrections. This will correct any optical issues on the lens and give us a correct view of how the image was taken. Next, I want to begin by adjusting my white balance and giving this image a warmer tones since it is a sunrise, and also adjusting the tint since the tones are a bit greened and I want to adjust it to the correct color. Next, I will brighten the image by a little since it is a bit dark, especially in the shadows, and also want to introduce more contrast since I feel I can enhance the tones and create more difference between the darks and the brights. I can further enhance this contrast by darkening my highlights to prevent overexposure, and in contrast I will brighten my shadows since they are very dark, especially on the two center sides of the image. I can also brighten the really dark parts of my image by slightly increasing my blacks, but being careful to not create a too faded look. Next, I can soften the image by a little by reducing the clarity. And lastly, I will enhance the colors of the image by boosting the vibrance to bring up more color, but leaving the saturation the same as we will enhance them later on. Let's take a look at the before and after. I move on to the tone curve, which will give us more room to play with our highlights and shadows, and I can do this by first creating my first 3 points in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. And as always, I'll introduce more contrast in the darks by increasing the bottommost point, darkening the shadows a little, and increasing the highlights again, but being careful to prevent overexposure. Next, I also want to play around with the green image at the tone curve since I still notice a green tone, and I can fix this by creating a point in the highlights and midtones and dropping the highlights towards magenta. And same with the shadows, I will move them slightly towards magenta. Awesome, I think that's looking a lot better. The next step is to go to the HSL panel, but in this case I will only change some colors in the luminance. I will darken the oranges to bring out more color in the clouds, same with the yellows. I will brighten the aqua color a little that's in the sky, but darken the blue tones to enhance that blue sky and add some saturation. In the color grading panel is where we can choose what tones the shadows, midtones, and highlights will have. I'll start in the shadows by very slightly adding a warmer tone and lowering the luminance. Next, in the midtones, I want to create complementary colors by adding a cooler tone, but also slightly increasing the saturation. And lastly, in the bright parts of the image, I'll keep the warmer tones by giving the hue some orange tones and slightly brightening the highlights. As always, the next step is to go to the detail panel to sharpen our image. I always have the amount around 40. I then like to zoom into the image to see exactly how much detail we are adding to the image, and holding Option and dragging the masking slider we can select exactly what we want to add detail to. Same with the detail slider and radius, I'll increase holding Option, but just to the point where I can start to see what the original image is. This will help and prevent over-sharpening the image. Let's take another quick look to see how much change we have done to our image so far. I will add some vignetting to this image to enhance the focus on the city in the center of the image, and I can do this by darkening around the photo and reducing the amount. The midpoint I drop all the way to 0. Feather I'll increase all the way to 100 to create a gradual vignette, and lastly, holding Option, I'll increase the roundness slightly so it's even around the entire image. The last step before we focus on the local adjustments is to go to the color calibration tab And to finally adjust the green tones that we still have in the image, I'll increase the tint towards magenta, and as you can see, this makes a huge difference on the tones, especially in the shadows. I'll increase the green primary hue slider towards the green side, and same with the saturation, I'll increase slightly. Lastly, I will go to the blue primary hue slider and move it towards the left to enhance the blue and aqua tones. And to finally boost these colors, I can increase the saturation, and as you can see, this has given our image an overall enhanced saturated tone, which I think looks amazing. Now we can focus on the local adjustments, with first using a radial brush on the right side of the image, where the sunlight is the strongest. And in this case, I will add a slight warmer tone, while increasing the blacks and reducing the clarity to add a glow effect. I also think the two sides of the land are still too dark, so I will add a new radial brush filter around each by using the range mask to select only the dark parts of the selection. I will then again add some warm tones, while increasing my highlights to add a glow effect, and also increasing the shadows of the weight to bring out more detail on that area. I will then duplicate this brush and add it to the other side of the image, where we also have some land that appears to be very dark. Perfect, that looks so much better. I will add yet another radial brush, this time around the sky and the clouds. And I will continue to add some warm tones, while increasing the blacks to give a faded look, and dropping the clarity to soften the texture on the clouds. I also want to slightly enhance the clouds right above the CN Tower by adding another radial brush, and again adding some warmer tones. I'll also fade the blacks and softening that area by reducing the clarity. I'll create a new brush around the city since I want to brighten it up a little. I can start by going over to my luminance and selecting the shadows only. And then using the exposure slider to increase the brightness. Lastly, I will create one last radial brush around the center of the image. And I will add some warmth to this area. I will also add some brightness and softening that area by reducing the clarity. The next step is to enhance the city in the center of the image and give it more focus. I can do this by adding two graduated filters, one from the bottom and one from the top. For the bottom one, I will darken slightly the bottom of the image and reduce the highlights. Same for the top filter. I'll drag it from the top to the bottom. And in this case, I'll reduce the temperature a little. darken the highlights, and darken the shadows. This should draw the eye towards the center of the image. I will now toggle between the before and after, and we can see all the progress we have made so far. The rest of the edit will be done in Photoshop, so I will right click on the image, select Edit In, and Edit in Photoshop. Once in Photoshop, I'll begin by creating a duplicate of my image to save the original. And then I'll open my image in the Nik Collection Color Effects Pro. The first filter I'll apply is a Brilliance and Warmth filter. With this filter, I'll increase the saturation a little bit, and also add some warmth to the sunrise. I want to be careful to increase it slightly, or else the image will become oversaturated with colors. The next filter I'll add is a Glamour Glow effect. With this one it makes the edges glow, but it does add some saturation, so I'll have to reduce it a bit. And at the same time, I'll add some warmth to that glow and enhance the sunrise. I will also bring the shadows and highlights slider down so that it affects the entire image. The third filter I will add is a cross-processing filter. In my opinion, this filter works great, especially for city shots, as it adds a really nice artistic feel to the image. Next, I will add the tonal contrast filter so that I can adjust the highlights, shadows, and midtones, and be able to adjust how much detail I want in each. This will help in creating an HDR effect, so again I have to adjust it accordingly to not overdo it. The second last filter is a skylight filter. As the name suggests, this filter enhances their warmth effect and helps in focusing on warm colors like the oranges, yellows, and reds, while adjusting the blue tones accordingly. Lastly, I will add the Pro Contrast filter. This one is also one of my favorites as I can enhance the contrast on the photo while maintaining detail and not softening the image. This filter gives the final touch to boost the colors in the image and intensify that sunrise feel. I'll head over to the top left and click and hold compare so that I can see what changes these filters have done to the photo. You can see how amazing these filters work. So here we have our final image in Photoshop. Thank you guys for coming along on episode 3 of my editing tutorials. If you learned something new and enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing for future tutorial videos. Thanks as always, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.